show you the thumbs up, then you can. Yeah.
Okay.
Anaswara, you might have to adjust your mic.
Okay. Adjust my mic. Okay. Am I audible right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Anshura Joy, Research Associate of DRaS Internship Program, DRaS Praghna Internship Program. It is my pleasure to welcome you all. Today's program will be presented by Mr. Ridipt Singh. He has completed this internship and will present his paper titled Russia-India-China Relations Towards Rebalancing the World Order. The program will commence with an opening address by Commodore S.L. Deshmukh, Nav Sena Medal, retired, followed by the presentation by Mr. Ridipt for about 20 minutes. The presentation will be followed up by a question and answer session in which you can interact with the presenter. After the Q&A session, Commander J.K. Nair, Founder Director of Defense Research and Studies, will share a small note about the DRaS Praghna program. Thereafter, Dr. Ashok Dua will share mentor's perspective. We will then end the program with a short thank you note. I request all of you to keep your mics muted except when you are required to speak. We hope this presentation will be of immense interest to all. Thank you. I now request Commodore Deshmukh to commence the program with his opening address.
Chitra ma'am, Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Dua, and my young friends. At the outset, I must compliment DRaS and Praghna for this new and a very appropriate initiative of giving an opportunity to the young minds to make the presentation on the papers or the articles which they have researched for. I feel that's a fitting finale for all the trouble which the writer as well as the mentors have taken, and it gives us a sense of satisfaction to see our mentees doing well and confidently presenting their research work. Today's topic is the most relevant to the geopolitical situation as of now: Russia, India, China relations towards rebalancing the world order. In the current global scenario, the Indo-Pacific region has assumed the greater importance because of China's hegemony in the South China Sea. And the South China Sea is also the hotbed for the troubled relations between the countries in that region, with the China's hegemony and their claims on various EEZs, creation of the artificial islands, militarization, etc. With this particular problem on hand, most of the countries are trying to find the solutions how to fend against the troubles which have been created by China as such. On the other hand, the Russia-Ukraine issue has affected the world order on many fronts: economic, military, as well as it may or may not result into the food security trouble for the world. The energy crisis is also looming. As far as India is concerned, so far we have managed to do a tightrope walk in balancing our relationship with Russia, and the USA becomes an indivisible part of this particular conundrum. However, the India-China relationship is a big pawn in the chess game of this board, and we really need to be aware of what is happening on this front. As Ridipt has pointed out, Russia, India, and China need to learn to collaborate because it is going to create a new world order. We have to understand that these three countries come together, the kind of world economy which will be dominated by these three countries with their own GDPs coming together, the kind of resources these three countries have, and they can bring it onto the table for the world. And in general, the peace between these three countries will bolster the peace in the region as well as into the whole world. I must compliment Ridipt for choosing a very apt topic though unusual, if I may say so. And his research has been quite thorough, and the trouble which he has taken to compile this paper deserves a word of praise. I said it is an unusual topic for the simple reason that today, when we talk about the cooperation between Russia, India, and China, certain questions come to our mind whether it is in the realm of feasibility or not. But as a researcher, our work is always to ensure that we are basing our opinions on the real research and see whether topic which we are presenting is within the realm of feasibility. Ridipt has done a good job by bringing out the necessity for the cooperation between these three countries, and he has focused on the need for creation of a common currency between these three countries, which will help in balancing the trade as well as creating a common economic bond between the three countries. His article will focus on the relations between these three countries, RIC, and he will also present the facts and figures which will show the commonalities and the factors on which this bond can be built. He has also dwelt upon the issues which are existing between India, China, and Russia, India, China together, and he has also proposed some solutions. I would not like to steal the thunder from the paper and the research which he has done with his own hard work. So it's my pleasure to invite Ridipt to present his paper, and I have absolutely no doubts that at the end of it, the audience will be enlightened on how to build the relation between these three countries and how beneficial they are going to be, not only to this region, but to the globe and the global politics as such. Over to you, Ridipt. All the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you, sir.
Deshmukh.
Thank you. Moving forward with the program, I will give a brief introduction about Mr. Ridipt Singh. Ridipt is currently pursuing his master's from Symbiosis School of International Studies, Pune, Maharashtra. He has interned with our program for the past 4 months. He will now present his paper titled Russia-India-China Relations Towards Rebalancing the World Order. Ridipt, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Anaswara. Good evening, everyone present here, and my most sincere thanks to DRaS Praghna Research Program for providing me with a platform to reach out to a wider audience and share my research findings. My research topic is Russia-India-China relations towards rebalancing the world order, where I use the conceptual underpinning of the Primakov doctrine to assess the possibility and dynamics of Russia, India, and China coming together for an economic framework. My presentation is largely divided into three topics. First is the Primakov doctrine itself. Second is the willingness of nations to reduce their dependency on the US dollar. This phenomena is largely dubbed as the De-Dollarization trend. And the third is a possible economic framework for all these nations, which I confer through the optimum currency area theory. Additionally, I would also highlight the rationale and challenges for this collision, along with some policy recommendations. So the idea of India, Russia, and China coming together to form a strategic trilateral was first conceptualized by Yevgeny Primakov. He has been an influential figure in Russian foreign policy and has held several key positions in the government, including as Prime Minister of Russia, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Director of Foreign Intelligence Service, and he's primarily known for coining the term the Primakov doctrine. This idea was a product of the geopolitical dynamics of the time, since the post-Cold War era was largely marked by a unipolar world, and after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, all power sharing and power control went to the West, and Soviet Union was relatively at its weak point at that point of time. The Primakov doctrine is essentially a foreign policy that seeks a balance of power and multipolarity. As per the doctrine, instead of competing with the USA alone, Russia should align with other major powers in the region and position itself as an indispensable state whose consent is necessary for any major issue faced by the international community. The doctrine also makes an argument for multipolarity, stating that a multipolar world will ensure checks and balances on any unilateral use of power. The Primakov doctrine has three major components. First is the Russian primacy in the post-Cold War era, marked by close and strong relations with former Soviet states. The second is opposing the eastward expansion of NATO, and the third component is partnership with Russia. An attempt to formally institutionalize the doctrine was made in 1998 when Primakov visited New Delhi. This idea was largely rejected by both India and China due to shared reasons. Uh, India and China both had deep trade ties with the USA. India and China shared issues at the border, and there was a shared perception that this collision might be perceived as an overt anti-America collision. Uh,
Ridip,
there,
move your slides.
yes, sir.
Your slides are not moving.
So is it visible now? So is it visible now?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Okay.
You're on the fourth slide now.
Yes, sir. So an attempt to formally institutionalize the doctrine was happened in 1998 when Primakov visited New Delhi. This idea was rejected by both India and China due to shared concerns. It was believed that this collision would be perceived as an overt anti-America collision, and it was a problem for India and China because they had deep trade ties with the West. And further, India and China, they shared issues at the border, and there was a shared concern that this idea of Primakov doctrine was driven more by Russian ambitions against the West instead of some genuine stride towards multipolarity. India's decision not to affirm with the idea was influenced by multiple factors. India at the time did not want to deflect from its non-alignment posture and was concerned that welcoming such an idea would include India in an overt anti-American agenda. India also had reservations regarding sharing a platform with China due to its direct support to Pakistan in Kashmir and continued tensions at the border. Due to this, the Primakov doctrine lapsed and Russia shifted its priorities towards strengthening its bilateral ties with China.
Ridit, could you please put it in full screen because I guess it's not visible to everyone.
Is it visible now?
It's could you put it in full screen mode?
It is in full screen mode.
To us, it's not in full screen mode actually. Yes, now it is. Thank you.
While the original idea of the alliance was ineffective, multiple reasons led to its revival with the name RIC, that is Russia, India, and China. The 2008 financial crisis put the US-led financial system under huge scrutiny. In response, alternatives to the existing financial order were considered, making a non-Western collision more plausible. Later, between 2011 and 12, anti-Putin protests erupted in Russia. The blame was put on USA for attempting regime change. And in response, President Vladimir Putin wrote an article titled Russia and the Changing World. This article emphasized the role of India and China in the international community. Further, the imposition of Western sanctions upon the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014 created additional imperatives for pursuing such an alliance. All these developments renewed attention to the RIC strategic alliance and put the Primakov doctrine back in the Russian foreign policy agenda. So far, the RIC is limited as a discussion group. It has only made statements regarding commitment to UN, international law. It has condemned international terrorism and has expressed concerns about conflicts around the world. These statements are not unique in nature and are very similar to the earlier statements made by BRICS. And this has put RIC in huge scrutiny itself, with President Putin himself suggesting that the main value of RIC is only as a building block for BRICS and nothing else. And four major factors have contributed as impediments to gaining momentum for the RIC. First, the Russia, India, and China separately have different political systems, which remain the biggest barrier to further development of their trilateral ties. Second, there is a divergence of opinion among the general population and the public elites, which further hinders any cooperation in discourse. Third, the security concerns and disputes become obstacles to any cooperation. And finally, the RIC will have to resolve issues at the operational level, trust deficit, and weak cooperation in non-political domains. One of the most major obstacle for the RIC is the constrained India-China relationship. Therefore, the very first initiative that the three nations must undertake is to resolve the border dispute between India and China. As our retired Foreign Secretary Shri Vijay Gokhale have said, both nations have mistrust over each other's intentions. It has created a perception problem. On the Indian side, the perception is that China is insensitive and indifferent to India's core concerns, while the Chinese perceive that India does not reciprocate China's goodwill. There is a further mistrust of identity perception as well. China does not identify India as a threat, and therefore thinks that it is adopting a benign attitude towards India. India, on the other hand, believes that China does not give an appropriate status to India as a regional power. Uh, Unlike China, India does not have any rivalry with USA, nor does it have the global ambition to dominate the world. Hence, China has more to lose from the dispute. China must China must consider this and give due consideration to India as a major regional power. This would be beneficial for China as well, since an antagonistic India will only complicate China's rise in a global political landscape, especially when China is subjected to huge scrutiny after the pandemic. Thus, China must ask itself if the strategic and global dimensions of the Indo-China relations are weakened to the point that the bilateral disputes are gaining salience. India should also consider the possibilities of policy adjustment towards China in the changing global dynamics. So, neither China nor India would gain anything from conflict in the region. Both nations are deeply engaged in economic terms. They manage ethnic nationalism and they maintain legitimacy of the state. Instead, China and India can foster cooperation on these very issues, uh, on other issues like arms control, climate change, trade, and labor laws. These domains can serve as a common ground to counter the Western countries in their narratives. On 8th September 2002, the Ministry of External Affairs stated that India and China reached a consensus to disengage their troops in the area of Gogra Hot Springs, which is PP-15, in a coordinated manner, which is essential for maintaining peace in the border areas. In light of further cooperation between India and China, such developments show a possible way forward for the feasibility of ERIC. To understand how states are able to cooperate on a larger scale despite their own border issues, ASEAN is a case that can be considered. In the case of ASEAN, the Philippine-Malaysia dispute over Sabah made the founding members realize that the need for cooperation and resolution of disputes is very crucial. In the later years, several bilateral maritime disputes emerged, like in the South China Sea, the Sulu Seas, and the Gulf of Thailand. However, ASEAN has been able to function successfully despite all these issues. Other issues like disputes in the Sulawesi and the South China Sea were resolved through arbitration from the International Court of Justice. Uh, this shows the willingness of ASEAN nations to bring an outside body rather than violent confrontation, showcases the commitment of ASEAN towards fostering peace and cooperation. However, issues and disputes within the ASEAN still exist today. Several policies have been made to use to contain these issues. First is the ASEAN Political Security Community Blueprint, which mentions confidence building measures and preventive diplomacy as the most important tools for maintaining peace. And the ASEAN also promotes the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in South Asia, otherwise known as TAC, according to which member states must refrain from any use of force or threat. The blueprint also suggests strategies meant for the prevention of disputes arising within ASEAN and a comprehensive approach suggesting an understanding among the members of ASEAN regarding settlement of differences and prevention of any further escalation of the existing disputes. So in ASEAN, we see multiple nations who, despite their own bilateral issues, have been able to manage and function as an organization. This has only been possible as the member nations had a firm realization regarding the need for cooperation to ensure peace and prosperity. Therefore, while India and China have their own territorial disputes at the border, that does not suggest that they cannot function together on a larger scale. Although RIC in itself has not been functioning at all, its value as a precursor to BRICS and SCO has been recognized. BRICS, unlike the RIC, has been able to further develop through initiatives like Contingency Reserve Arrangement and New Development Bank, which showcases an unexpected success in terms of creating a new form of governance and cooperation. On the other hand, the SCO was established with the priority of ensuring security. However, economic cooperation emerged as an objective in the mid 2000s. In 2003, SCO started a program of economic cooperation and multilateral trade. This program initiated 100 collaborative projects on trade, transportation, logistics, and many more. In addition, SCO Interbank Association and SCO Business Council was also established in the consecutive years. Due to the interlinked nature of security and economy, SCO focuses on large-scale infrastructure development projects. So, while BRICS focuses on cooperation on non-traditional security aspects, SCO focuses on traditional security aspects. Since Russia, India, China both share this platform, and it covers a broad range of international security issues that are relevant in the emerging multipolar world. Through this, the RIC can further strengthen the discourse for an increased role of non-Western nations in global governance. Now, the concept of de-dollarization is it is a reduction of dependency on the US dollar for international settlements. This discussion regarding the trend started in early 2000. After the default in 1998, Putin stated that a dollar would not yield any benefits and would further make situations worse, and would also hurt the financial sovereignty of other nations. BRICS have generated a common narrative regarding reduction of dependency on US dollar. However, there are some differences in interest and disagreements uh, that has failed any efforts made in this stride. While scholars have acknowledged the deepening of the financial cooperation of BRICS, there is disagreement regarding the credibility of initiatives by BRICS. Scholars who are critical of the collective mobilization capabilities of BRICS have argued that the grouping's heterogeneity in polity, economy, ideology, and the power asymmetry among the member nations undermines its collective mobilization capabilities. For instance, we can take the failed attempt by BRICS to create its credit rating agency. And further, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Kremlin focused more on securing financial spheres, and the plans for de-dollarization were put on hold. Now, unlike the 2014 attempt, this plan was focused more on switching to ruble-denominated payments whenever it could. Thus, the move away from the dollar became geo-economically crucial, as evident in the recent demand by Russia for switching to the ruble for payments in trading of gas with Europe. The war in Ukraine has presented an opportunity for India and China where they could strengthen their partnership with Russia economically and go ahead with creating an alternative financial system. Since both China and India did not condemn Russia for the war in Ukraine, this could also indicate a possibility of India and China emerging as key partners in the de-dollarization efforts. Before the invasion of Ukraine, Russian banks had limited dealings in yuan, but after the invasion, the Russian banks started using yuan with great enthusiasm. And China's vision of de-dollarization started with the implementation of cross-border interbank payment system. China has started to use yuan for its payment for Russian coal, and other commodity producers also shifting to yuan. In this regard, China has not denied the possibility of using rubles or yuan for trade in the energy sector with Russia. On the other hand, Russia and India have increased the use of their national currencies for bilateral trade since 2014. As a result, the trade in national currencies between the two countries rose from 6% to 30%. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, India and Russia have come up with alternative platforms for transactions that could facilitate trade in rupees and rubles. This new system would be set up between India's RBI and Russia's VEB. In this regard, considering the whole de-dollarization trend, a very accurate assessment of Russian objectives comes from Hudson Lockett in an article in the Financial Times. It assesses the ongoing war in Ukraine as a move that will accelerate the trend of de-dollarization. This trend is a goal for Russia and China, while certain actions by the Indian government and business community suggest a willingness to participate in this trend. Now, the parameter that I've used for this economic framework is the optimum currency areas. It was conceptualized by Robert Mundell in an article named A Theory of Optimum Currency Areas. Mundell raised the question of what economic criteria can lead multiple regions of the world to adopt a common currency. In this regard, the euro serves as a primary example. After the establishment of the economic monetary union and the adoption of the single currency, the trade cost significantly declined and the integration of trade improved efficiency of firms in areas of member countries. So initially the 9 countries showcased a more efficient in functioning of their corporate firms. The integration process allowed firms in the euro area to increase their competitiveness internationally by setting up cross-border production structures. Exports from the euro area gained a share in the foreign markets in the first 3 years. And after the establishment of the EMU, however, in the following decade, the price competitiveness at the global level, it slowly declined and stabilized at lower levels. Overall, the adoption of common currency has enhanced aggregate productivity growth in Europe. Another instance is from ASEAN. After the Asian financial crisis of 1997, there was this issue led to the idea of ASEAN adopting a common currency. In comparison to the EU, ASEAN has favorable factor mobility, relatively high labor, as well as capital mobility, and it ranks high in terms of wage and price. Further, multiple ASEAN nations have trade to GDP ratios and trade intensity ratios higher than in the Western Europe. However, when we talk about adopting a common currency for fostering peace and prosperity, we need to consider both cases. In the case of EU, common currency led to the fulfillment of peace and prosperity. However, on the other hand, ASEAN has been cooperating successfully without the adoption of any common currency. So, common currency, although may not be an essential, it can be a possible and effective way forward for greater economic cooperation. For the RIC, adopting a common currency framework would prove to be challenged not just regarding perception, but further social, economic, and political instances. Russia, India, and China all have different approaches in conducting their foreign policy, their internal affairs, and economic engagements. Therefore, it is necessary for them to set and arrange several political and economic preconditions which are required for a common currency to function. In discussions regarding the RIC, India's membership in the Quad cannot be ignored. The revival of the Quad from its nascent stage is attributed to China's growing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific. Despite the efforts not to project the Quad as an anti-China alliance, its establishment is understood as an attempt to contain the growing Chinese influence in the region. While the Quad allows a platform for India to expand its influence in the Indo-Pacific and counterbalance China in the region, it is also likely to create disadvantageous circumstances for India-China relations as well. The grouping can revamp tensions between India and China, which would affect cooperation in other multilateral platforms like BRICS and SCO. Therefore, it is most favorable to India that the Quad is not reduced entirely to an anti-China alliance. Among the Quad members, India is the only country that shares borders with China and has experienced military standoffs. Therefore, India needs to make sure not to create circumstances that would lead to military aggression between the two nations. This monetary framework monetary framework of OCA should be limited purely to economic grounds, with no overlapping of interest with other initiatives in the region. Therefore, to avoid any complications for the RIC will have to be very careful regarding its perception and in political communications. So some policy recommendations that I would like to present here. In order to transform the RIC into an effective economic platform, multiple policies need to be enacted, and it needs to happen sequentially. First, it must be noted that India and China are partners in trade and have been able to keep their economic engagements intact despite their border issue. So here, both India and China need to realize the importance of cooperation on larger issues, and lessons can be drawn from other multilateral platforms like BRICS, SCO, or the TAC or the ASEAN Blueprint for Cooperation. Second, the idea of the trilateral was a failure since both India and China were particular about not appearing to join a coalition that is anti-West. Further, India's membership in the Quad and its vision of ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific can also act as a hurdle to the RIC. Quad is largely seen as a coalition to contain China in the region. This is a concern that still exists today. Therefore, it must be made clear that RIC is an economic forum. It has no overlapping of interest with other initiatives, and the political communication for the RIC necessary institutional and political rhetoric currency. This includes establishment of organizations, regional banks, and convergence of policies at the institutional level. Fourth, the adoption of a common currency needs to happen gradually through a series of policy initiatives that would seek convergence of economic and financial policies of all these three nations. And finally, the RIC, in its current stage, uh, since it has only seen success regarding creation of other multilateral platforms, RIC can further extend its economic cooperation on a much larger scale if it extends through other multilateral platforms like BRICS and SCO. I would like to conclude the choice of means of payment in cross-border international settlements has been a priority since the past. However, after the Bretton Woods regime collapsed in the 1970s, it has received a non-priority status. When President Richard Nixon announced the end of dollars convertibility to gold, a new global monetary framework was made in which private banks could make international payments in the national currencies of the so-called strong currency countries. There has been an assumption that euro, with increasing its shares in the international system, will continue the ongoing strong currency regime. However, Europe is unlikely to continue that trend. And if no other country or region takes charge to provide the other countries to earn a preferred reserve currency, a national currency-based international system will cease to continue. With the dollar being the currency, with the primary currency, countries with well-developed markets were able to promote growth and maintain liquidity. However, the less developed market has experienced shocks similar to the experiences under the gold standard and through the Second World War. Upon the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the sanctions that are being put on Russia, there exists an opportunity to balance the world order if the RIC cooperates on creating an alternative financial system. It must be noted that factors that led to the failure of Primakov doctrine in the first place still exist today, especially the India-China border dispute. Among the RIC, Russia enjoys cordial relationships with both India and China. However, tense relations between Indo-China and are perhaps the biggest obstacle to a successful RIC. As of now, the negotiations between India and China regarding their border disputes at the LSE have largely been at a standstill. But a successful RIC would require greater cooperation between India and China, since the existing mistrust and disputes only negate the feasibility of Russia as an efficient platform. Therefore, it is important that the benefits of cooperating with China on a larger scale are discussed in negotiation and economic benefits are incentivized for cooperation. That will be all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ridipt. That was indeed very insightful. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic is now open for question and answers. So if you wish, you can post your question in the chat box. And please ensure to keep your questions or comments brief. Any questions, they can be put in the chat box.
Dr. Srinivasan, am I allowed to ask a question rather than putting in the box?
Yes, yes, certainly.
Ridipt, first of all, I must compliment you on the study which you have done and the presentation. What I'm going to say is not only a question, but a few suggestions, which will be applicable to everybody. First of all, the slide formats, please use the white slide background and the blue, because reading through the slide with a gray background becomes very difficult. Be also concise about the font what you are using so that it is more readable to the audience. Because what happens when you are speaking, it's a general tendency of the audience to try and read what you are presenting on the slide. And if it is not readable, half my attention is diverted because I am unable to read what is being presented. So these 2-3 things, if you are taken care of, the presentations will go and it improves the quality of the presentation. This is applicable to everyone. Now, when you spoke about creation of a basket, which is independent of the any other motives behind. Now, the very first question which I have, if India and China got a bilateral trade, much largely in favor of China, because they do not follow the rule of law, dumping of the cheaper goods, which is the problem, routing the goods through third countries, which are Chinese made but the stamped otherwise. Now, if I go for a common currency and this trade keeps increasing in my disfavor, we have experienced this with ASEAN, if you're aware. And if I keep bolstering the Chinese economy and creating problem for me, the money which I give to China will be used militarily against me. I'm 100% sure about it. Now, if this core fear exists in the Indian mind, can we delink RIC Economic Forum away from the every motive? That's my question. Can you just explain to me how it could be done? Thank you.
Sir, my consideration for the OCA did not actually come from this larger picture between India and China trade relations. Considering that India and China are both committed towards rebalancing the world order, and given the existing academic literature suggests that with in order to counter the West, India, China, and Russia are the only three most favorable candidates to do so. While writing the paper, I was more concerned about creating a collision rather than the actual financial outcomes. This issue considered, I must say that it will be a huge obstacle during the policy convergence part when these issues might come up. However, uh, while adopting the common currency area, we will also have to ensure that certain footfall favors us rather than the other nations.
Thank you.
Just one small addition I will make to what Ridipt said. When the apprehension that yes, Chinese dump their goods on everyone, rather cheap goods on everyone, it's not just a mere apprehension, it is reasonably well known. Everybody knows it. Okay, even so much so that once in Gangtok, one taxi driver very casually remarked, saying that made in China, do tin mahina. Okay, they don't last beyond that. Okay, but on a lighter vein apart, there is one recommendation which Ridipt had very carefully given in his presentation. When it comes to India and China, this economic relations or financial relations have to be very carefully calibrated by very discerning policy initiative. That is where a couple of points should merit our attention. I'm talking about everyone's attention. Why should we import only from China? Our own capacity for production is limitless, actually. If China is 1.4 billion, we are 1.3 billion. Okay. Industrially, infrastructurally, and in every other manner, we have grown and we are continuing to grow. There is no doubt about it. And that is why we are talking about RIC at all. So, our capacity for production is there, which can probably match or maybe even outdo Chinese on many of the things that we are regularly importing from them. For example, during this COVID time itself, notwithstanding all the bans and other things that took place of Chinese apps and other things, we ended up importing 67% more Chinese goods. And surprisingly, that the bulk of it was API for manufacturing pharmaceuticals. We call ourselves as the vaccine hub of the world. We have even adopted a term called vaccine diplomacy. But to make that vaccine, we need API from China. On such matters, if we focus our attention and create our manufacturing capacity, then our dependency on China will automatically come down. That is one factor which we must very consciously. This is a policy matter. The policy establishment must very carefully study this and increase in-house capacity. The second and the last dimension is trade. Again, this corona instance itself proved that during this corona phase, we also had Galwan, we had all other standoffs, we had other border issues. The 15th round of negotiations had failed. The 16th just was wishy-washy. All this was going on parallelly, but trade was not affected. It is a very important point. Today, the world is driven not by territorial ambitions, not by what you call the intent to dominate the world or something like that. The world is today being driven by economics. When we say economics, people are looking for, why did people run to China and establish their factories? Microsoft has got, Intel has got, everyone, Apple has got, the whole world established their manufacturing facilities in China. For what? Because China could provide cheap labor and China could provide necessary infrastructure. Even though items are being manufactured for Microsoft 10,000 miles away, it was still cheaper. That's a very important lesson we must very carefully study, because we also have that kind of a, land mass, that kind of a potential, that kind of resources, everything. What we need is a little focus. So if we focus as a policy institution on the second dimension of providing facilities with appropriate labor, because we already have a huge number of educational institutions and skill development programs and everything. Again, if the policy establishment concentrate on this, we need not necessarily become dependent. There could be a healthy trade balance between the two of us. That's what I would like to add. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Commander J.K. Nair. Sir, would you like to ask Ridit himself, or do you want me to read it out?
You can read it out.
Okay. Ridit, the question goes like, do you think it will happen? Can India and China break the ice? Sir meant in terms of policy recommendation.
For this, I can only quote the foreign ministers of both these nations. Wang Yi, during his visit to India, he also focused on keeping the border dispute at the back burner and focusing on cooperation on a larger scale. Dr. Jayashankar, I think 2 months back, also mentioned that until and unless we secure our border issues, the age of Asia cannot come, as in India and China cannot rise in the global community. Considering that pragmatism prevails, and given the instances from ASEAN and all other nations, including what Srinivasan sir just said about enhancing the in-house production capacity, I think circumstances can exist where India and China can be upfront about it and cooperate.
Okay, thank you.
So may I add something, if you allow?
Yes, sir, yes.
JK, you have really pointed out a very interesting phenomena. We have got to understand that though the probability of cooperation between China and India does exist, if pragmatism prevails, however, the experience what we have got today on the table is China is just fooling around with India with no serious intentions of allowing the border issues to settle. And it is being done intentionally, this is my personal opinion, that keeping Indian border issue alive goes in favor of China much more. Keep India unstable, force India to commit its resources on keeping the Himalayan borders safer or at least intact, and that diverts India's attention from the IOR. That's one. Secondly, if the Indian resources are not committed so heavily on the borders, the money will be available towards investment in the points which Dr. Srinivasan has brought out. Improve the infrastructure, modernize the facilities, create skill development colleges and institutions, build your labor power from the mundane labor to the skilled labor, thereby increasing the productivity. So China knows what it is doing. Secondly, it is also enticing Pakistan by giving free aid in terms of fighter aircraft, ships, you name it, and it is there. So that two fronts are already there. And unfortunately, we are also fool enough to keep our internal discord also on such a high note that today we really talk about 2.5 front war on our hand. So unless, as Dr. Srinivasan has said, we kick off the corruption from our system, build our industrial capability, improve the production and the quality of the goods, wherein we actually become self-sufficient, reducing the dependence from China, as well as the basic import. And once India is economically strong, we don't have to go and woo China. Mark my words, China will come wooing you because you can match rupee for rupee to him. Unless we focus on this economic development, any respect for India from China, you just forget about it. They will keep you destabilized, they will keep you provoked, they will ensure that you will not rise, so that China achieves its own aim of being the sole, not only the regional power, but the only power in the world which can compete with USA. And as Dr. Srinivasan has said, India is the one who has actual capabilities to achieve both. So unless we are pragmatic, cooperation between India and China will always be on an unequal footing. This is my personal study, what I've done, and this is my personal opinion. And I would like to request Dr. Srinivasan, because he is much more read on this issue, to tell me whether I'm thinking in the right direction or not. Thank you, sir.
I endorse that. I endorse that actually. There is no if I may sound politically correct when I say this, but I mean all of you are aware that I have no political affiliations. What the term Atmanirbharta truly means. Okay. We have the potential, and if we achieve that, then we need not worry about anyone. No one will threaten, because they have something to take from you. Okay. And we have minimum to take from others. So that way, if we focus, we can do it, and we are already doing it. It's my perception that we are already doing it. It's just that we need to remove certain bottlenecks, like Kamala Deshmukh mentioned about corruption and bureaucracy. These are all things which we need to address. Otherwise, we are already on the track. That is my belief, and I endorse your opinion, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ridipt.
Thank you. If anyone has any comments, they are welcome to come forward and type in the chat box.
Srinivasan, sir, may I give a few general comments after the presentation so that everybody gets an idea what would be rather expected from them?
Sir, can we keep it at the end of the session? Because
Fine,
all
sir.
of us are here. Yes, sir.
I guess we don't have any more questions or comments. So I would like to say that thank everyone for their questions and comments. And now I request Commander. Now I request Commander J.K. Nair to present a small note on DRaS Praghna program.
Thank you, Anushtara. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed very happy to listen to the young minds, and let me congratulate Mr. Ridipt Singh to do a wonderful job. It is not an easy topic. It is a challenging one. We need to take his recommendation very seriously. When we started this research and you know guidance and writing program, we found it was unique at that time, and no other agency in this country is doing the way our mentors are doing. By word of mouth, this program is now becoming more popular among the young scholars and students across universities. And I strongly believe that the time has come for we seniors to listen to the perspectives of our youngsters and correct them. And I believe this new initiative is again a very unique one, and I don't think many think tanks in our country is giving an opportunity for youngsters to speak their mind. I'm sure we will have more exciting sessions in future. On behalf of the entire DRaS Praghna family, let me wish Mr. Ridipt the very best. We also take this opportunity to render our sincere gratitude and appreciation to our mentors, Dr. Srinivasan, Commodore Deshmukh, and Professor Ashok Dua, and also Mrs. Chitra for blessing this occasion. Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Dr. Ashok Dua, sir, to come and share his perspective on mentorship.
Thank you, Anaswa, for giving me this opportunity to share my perspective on Ridipt's paper. Mr. Ridipt's research article entitled Russia, India, and China Alliance Towards Balancing the World Order makes an interesting reading. The paper attempts to answer two main research questions, and these are: how can Russia, India, and China form a strategic alliance to create an economic framework based on common currency? And second question is, how would Russia, India, and China reshape the geopolitical dynamics in the Indian subcontinent, especially in the context of Quad and the Indo-Pacific? Very interesting research questions, I must say, and Ridipt has handled them extremely well. Before I give my perspective, I would briefly touch upon the state of relationships amongst Russia, India, China, RIC in short, the three leading powerful economies and members of multilateral institutions like the SCO and the BRICS. Russia and India hold a historical and time-tested relationship. We have had exchanges in many areas of common interest, including heavy industry, defense, etc. China and Russia also enjoy friendly relationship with each other. However, the same cannot be said of the relationship between India and China at this juncture. The relations between India and China are riddled with trust deficit. It has taken a giant downturn from days of mutual bonhomie of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai to the recent Galvan clashes in 2020. Joining the Quad, a group of, as you all know, US, Japan, India, and Australia, has apparently further degraded relations with China. Economically, India has a huge trade dependency on China as well as Russia. India's bilateral trade with China and Russia for the period of April to August this year, as per our Department of Commerce, stands at US$ 50 billion in case of China and US$ 18 billion in case of Russia. Now, India's strategic alliance with Russia and China with an aim to form a economic framework based on common currency, although to my mind is probable, yet highly unlikely at this point of time due to prevailing trust deficit and unresolved border disputes with China. And three countries have different languages, different religious beliefs, different culture and political systems. Besides, RIC strategic alliance is likely to be perceived as anti-West, anti-Quad, which seeks to contain China's growing influence in Indo-Pacific. Thus, the future of India's foreign policy will have China at its core, unavoidable. But the ability to balance relations with the US and Russia will largely determine India's success. And lastly, someone already brought it out, and I will re-emphasize, the way to go is to become Atmanirbhar. When you are Atmanirbhar, and when you have nothing to ask anyone that you give me this or you give me that, that's the way to go. That's the way you speak from strength. So there is no easy solution, and Atmanirbharta is, to my mind, in my opinion, is the way to go. Lastly, good research by Ridipt. It was interesting reading his paper. My hearty congratulations to you, Ridipt. All the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Commodore S.L. Deshmukh sir to give his perspective on his presentation.
Basically, these comments are applicable to everybody. We must try and understand that the topics which are discussed on this particular forum are of relevance to the economic, military, and the geopolitical security of our own country. We sit in a very sensitive geopolitical, rather geographical situation. Therefore, whatever we present has got a lot of meaning into it, and people are attentively want to understand. So when we give a presentation, it is important for us to speak slowly so that the words we are speaking or the idea what we are conveying is understood by the people. By saying that, I want to say this, therefore it will be saying that. But I can also say it very quietly, saying that this is how the picture has been painted out. So therefore, my humble request to all the young minds who will be presenting, you must be aware of the speed at which we speak while making a presentation. It's very, very important. Secondly, coordination of your speech and your slides is equally important. For that, I also use it even today. I might have made 100 presentations, but I'm not the master. We always, what we call it, a cue card. You write the first line of a paragraph and the line where the slide needs to be changed, and you number them 1, 2, 3, 4. And on that line, there is an arrow. So while you are giving a presentation, just one glance, it shows a cue, time to change the slide. Because if you coordinate your slides with your speech, the impact what you can make on the audience is multiplied by 2. So you must ensure that slides coordination with your speech. Thirdly, the ideas what you are conveying, points what you make, the correlation between them has to be evident moment I focus on that particular topic. So not only you give a line of what is the point you are rather highlighting, how it correlates with the other, this link has to come through your speech. Suppose I'm speaking on the terrorism. I say there are quite a few countries in the Asian region who are promoting terrorism. However, it is important to see the Pakistan's link into that terrorism. And the next point I jump on. There is a correlation between the first point and the second point. The impact and the absorption rate for the audience is really good. It leaves a good impression about the presenter because every presenter does tremendous amount of hard work, research, writing the paper, corrections, conversion into the slides, and finally the presentation. If we do not present it properly, all the 90% of the hard work which you have done has just gone down the tube. And that's not the way we want. We not only want our researchers' papers to be published in the good journals and forums, we also want the people to say, you want to present your paper, go to the DRaS Praghna website, see the way Ridipt has presented his paper. That's how it should be done. We are here to set the standards. We are not run-of-the-mill, and we will not, as mentors, will not allow this to be a run-of-the-mill. I'm being very categorical about it. You are good people. We enjoy working with you. So please do not let us down our faith in you. You can do it, and I will expect much more from the following presentation. Ridipt, this wasn't a criticism on you at all. It is a guideline for everybody. I've enjoyed your presentation. It was the most difficult topic to present because, as Dr. Dua said, it is within the realm of feasibility, but the possibility of happening is remote. So presenting such a topic with confidence backed by facts and figures needs tremendous amount of hard work and confidence. My compliments. Thank you so very much. That's what I wanted to say, Anaswara.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my privilege to share a small token of appreciation for your presence and participation in this program. We hope that opportunities like this for emerging scholars and students will contribute to their personal development as well as advancement of knowledge. I am especially grateful to Dr. Srinivasan, Commander J.K. Nair, Commodore S.L. Deshmukh, and Dr. Ashok Dua for mentoring and guiding all of us in this program. I am also thankful to all our guests and audiences for their enthusiastic participation. Thank you and have a pleasant evening. Jai Hind.
Anaswara,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. You can never ever forget a strong woman who stands behind all of us. Chitra
Yes.
ma'am, my sincere thanks to you for all the support you have given, and I mean every word of it. We stand on the foundation which you have built for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chitra. I'm so sorry. I missed so
And
sorry.
congratulations to the young team. Keep it up and please just take up the few points that has been mentioned. And I'm sure we'll grow as we present. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anaswara. I think we'll call it a pleasant evening right now, and I'll take a maybe 10 minutes break.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 5:15 we will log in using our usual
Yes, sir. Okay.
link and attend to the other youngsters who sent in their work. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
All a very, very happy Deepavali. All
Happy
of you.
Diwali, ma'am. Happy
We too
Diwali.
wish
Happy
you
Diwali.
a happy Diwali.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Best wishes.